Hey everybody, welcome back to It's Just Bodybuilding, episode 12, with your host, myself, Big Ron Partlow, and of course, Dusty Hanshaw. And today we have Joe Bennett, the hypertrophy coach. He's hardcore. You're going to love it. Get ready to learn. So, Dusty,
yes, sir.
Have you recovered from the Chris Aceto interview?
You know, it's nonstop. I've still got people blowing it up. I got to check every day, too, with questions and things like that. So definitely some huge feedback on that one. I think people really identified with the fact that contrary to all the gurus online, there's not any science or exact fact of how things are going to go every single time. And for some reason, it takes the best in the world to say that out loud for people to go, oh, I see. Like, I don't know why they couldn't understand that before. If it wasn't the case, then wouldn't we all be 100% every single time?
Yeah, if it was textbook, it would be like math, right? You'd get the same result every time. But Chris has such a unique way of looking at things, and I think it really eases people's minds. Like, people that work with them, it really puts them at ease, So, but I'm excited to go. That was a pretty cerebral in Chris's way,
right?
And now we're going to do something different. We're going to bring on the hypertrophy coach, Joe Bennett, who, do I call him an Instagram phenomenon? Because he's a legit, really good coach too. So that's like. But he's got his Instagram down pat, man. He's doing a fantastic job. We're gonna bring him on, and I think it's gonna get high tech, which I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, I got a notebook. I'm ready.
You got a notebook? I'm ready to absorb some stuff. I'm not gonna pretend I know everything. So let's bring on the hypertrophy coach, Joe Bennett. We'll dial him up here. Hopefully, there's not more than one on Skype. All the imposters.
Everyone wants to be Joe Bennett now. It's because the beard game is so strong.
Yeah, so the beard's funny. You can see him from a long ways away.
And there he is.
Hey, what's going on, guys?
We got to turn the camera on, Joe. Got to get that beard live.
Do I not have a camera? Hold on, let me see if I can figure this out.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. Sweet.
There we are.
All right, good. All right, sweet. I'm not too tech savvy, so I'm glad I got my.
Well, I was just hyping you up as the high tech master, but
no, not at all.
Training us.
I can barely turn my cell phone on myself. I'm pretty much a man child. Okay. So yeah.
So you have someone doing your Instagram for you.
Yeah. No. Well, I know how to do Instagram. Like, that's the funny thing is, I think I've only been doing it for like 3 years. So like, I'm right on pace with most people's like grandma. So it's like, that's literally the first time I was like, okay, like, what is this thing? Like, how do I download an app? Like, what do I do with it? Like, what exactly are hashtags? Still not clear about that, but yeah, give me basic instructions, and I can now post and things like that. That's about the extent of it, though.
Well, I consider you. So I get young guys all the time that they're just so fucking busy in their head with all this information they're trying to absorb so they can get better, right?
Yeah.
And I could see it's just noisy as fuck in there.
Yeah.
And I don't I just say, dude, I could see this weight on you. You need to like dump 90% of this garbage.
Yeah.
You should follow, and I'll list like 3 or 4 people. And I always tell them to follow you.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
And you have a very, very you're very talented at getting information across, and you dumb it down enough that
I can understand.
That Dusty can understand it.
Perfect. All right, sweet.
But you still don't insult the viewer by taking out all the terminology. You challenge people to learn the terms. Like, you'll say humerus.
Yeah.
You won't say upper arm. You'll do stuff like flexion at the hip. Like, you'll use the terms. And I like it when the young guys are kind of forced to know that stuff. They should.
Yeah.
What's your thought when you do stuff?
Yeah, it's in all honesty, I always try and there's I don't know what the saying is because I'll mess it up, but obviously there's a saying, if you can't explain something, to a 12-year-old or to Dusty, whatever the age may be,
there you go.
it's like you don't actually understand it, and that's the thing too, where I don't tell people like I think I just really, really try and be accurate. So when I'm doing a post, I try and be accurate and I try and be transparent, are like my two big filters I try and put things through. And, so I say nobody really knows what anybody's got going on Instagram, social media, whatever. So I always tell people, I preface it that I'm really not that smart. And I think some people like try and think I'm being like modest, but like I'm not, because I know like actual smart people. And I joke, I've been doing something like this for so long. I've done so much actual like formal like education and stuff and work with so many good coaches and people smarter than me. And I joke as people confuse that with intelligence. I was like, there's no prereq for like these courses I took. Like they took my credit card and I got to show up. Right. And I honestly think if as many people just went to courses that I did, got out of their comfort zone, talked to other coaches, talked to people smarter than them, like by default, I'm here. And so I like, and I have, I think I have as much of a pure meathead background as most people were. Like, I had no idea what I was doing and I just like working out. So I just went like ape shit working out when I first started. And then just by picking up this information, like a lot of, I joke, my people are like the nerd people. And, so I try and write in a way that's, because again, I want to make sure that it's my filter for everything is like, what does this actually translate to on the gym floor? And some stuff can get a little abstract and a little bit out there, but that's really what I try and, take it through that filter. Like, does this actually apply to something? And then just speaking accurately. And sometimes because I got the nerd crew, like I have to say, if I say do this at the hip, or some people are like, well, it's not actually at the hip, it's at the pelvis, or is it this or that? I'm like, all right, calm down. Like, so I get those people too. Yeah, relax. And so, and I get it. I mean, I have to do it to myself where it's like, if there's a term for something, because some of the things that I use, if I attempt to talk, in force or type physics-y type thing, there's things that are very, very similar. And if I use one thing in place of the other, then it's technically not accurate and the nerds will get me and then I'm technically inaccurate. So it's like, I try and find a balance of, again, because I don't ever, I don't ever want to pretend that I'm smart because then I think like real smart people are going to call me out and be like, you're not smart. And I'm like, whoa, I didn't say I was smart. Hold on. And, so yeah, that's kind of my thought process is, I just try and be accurate. And again, I try and be transparent. So like, that's kind of like I said, my filter is like, where have I actually seen this provide benefit on the gym floor, whether with myself or with clients or people I've been around or athletes or coaches. And that's hopefully keeps it like applicable. Occasionally I'll get together with my nerd people occasionally and we'll just talk about something totally nerd. We won't even know what to do with it at the end of 2 hours of just nerding out, but that's just kind of like whatever. But for the most part, I try and have it through that filter of, what can I actually do with this information? So,
well, I want to know your meathead story because I don't know it. And I know a bit of it. I watched you diet down and compete. Was it the USA's you did?
Nationals. No, I didn't. I've been nationals. Twice. Yeah. And I did wildly mediocre at both.
But you were in fantastic condition.
Thank you.
And you showed clear improvement, which are like the two markers of a bodybuilder who puts in the effort and knows what he's doing. So, and you're not like a genetic phenom, which is also another marker of a good bodybuilder. Someone who can actually make improvements. So what's your meathead background? What drove you to do all that?
Yeah. I mean, in all honesty, I don't remember exactly the thing that clicked for me. Like, when I really, really got into the gym, the first two things that I remember is my brother had, Arnold's Encyclopedia of Modern Bodybuilding. And as soon as he got that, I was just like, fuck, I got like just, front to back, cover to cover, just had to read everything and stare at the picture. So my first real exposure to bodybuilding was kind of like that 70s, 80s, 90s era. Because a lot of it was in there. And I started bodybuilding kind of started working out, in the late 90s. And I had a coach. I ran track and I was kind of like an endurance, track. I did like mid-range 2-mile run and stuff. And I had a track coach who was like, hey, you guys just start working out twice a week. And so the joke was like I was in high school. And at that point in time, like the first thing I thought is the same thing every other guys does. We just like bench press and did curls. And I used to joke. I was like, yeah, this is going to make me run better. Right. And but I honestly got really hooked really fast to the point where like I just started, reading everything that I could find. So I think I have like, I think my wife made me throw away a bunch of them, but I got like two decades worth of like flex, muscle and fitness, muscular development. I just started absorbing all that at first. And then obviously the internet was obviously different then, but a ton of great information there as well too. So I did all my own like, meathead research. And I just like training so much that I just researched everything with training. I honestly didn't have any idea of how to diet or do anything all through high school, to the point where I was literally at some points, my last 2 years of high school, I was training 3 times a day, just because I liked working out. Right. And lo and behold, I graduated high school. I'm 5'11", and I graduated like 150. So I don't really know if I actually put any muscle on. Like I felt like I worked out. And I don't have a whole lot of pictures. I want to look back. I think I was one of those guys that just you could see my bones and some muscle. And,
right.
And so, but I mean, people literally thought, I mean, I was like every stereotypical asshole thing you could do. I mean, I was carrying around like a gallon jug of water. And like, I remember I was kind of like just I got along with everybody, but I would go in like classrooms and like write like the numbers I had done on the board that day. Like, here's what I bench pressed, just like being a dick. People are like, we don't fucking care. And I was like, well, it's really important to me. Shouldn't everybody care about this shit? And then in college, I just got, I was just as OCD. I just kind of had some first exposure to like, obviously like, okay, eating and sleeping is a part of recovery. I toned it down to twice a day. So I pretty much trained 2 days all through college. But my freshman year, I legit ate like 6,000 calories a day and slept like 10 to 12 to 13 hours like every single day. So I went from like 150 to like.
Did you actually go to class?
Yeah, I mean, I had it. The funny thing is, I had a lot of people in my first semester were like, take just 12 credits, So I took 12 credits my first semester, which is a light load. And I remember like one of them was completely online or something. So I literally had like most days I had like 2 or 3 hours of class a day, and none of them started like till noon or 1. And so I just had like this glorious schedule that I'll never have again. I had a job too, but it's like you realize like you think you don't have a whole lot of time then, but like I was aware like shit, I got a lot of time because I again had a couple hours of classes, maybe like 25 to 30 hours a week at a job. And so literally everyone in my dorm thought I was nuts. I used to joke that I was really good with the ladies because when you walked into my room, I had like Arnold pictures covering a wall and like Lord of the Ring pictures covering a wall. So I was a huge like bodybuilding / like nerd. And the joke is I was not good with girls at all. I'd be like, well, you guys aren't into Arnold and Lord of the Rings? What the fuck? Like, this is the total package right here. You don't want to talk about my workouts? And so I would ride, like there was a hardcore gym that I liked on the campus. I went to Florida and I would ride my bike like 15, 20 minutes to that gym twice a day. People thought I was, had mental problems with that. And the joke too is in Gainesville. And Gainesville actually gets to like 20s and 30s in the winter. And because I'm from Florida, I've been in Florida since like 1990. Like I don't have any winter clothes. So I used to ride my bike. Like my hands would be like frozen to the bike. I would just have like 4 hoodies on because I didn't actually have like a jacket. I was probably wearing sandals while I was riding my bike there too. So I was just like, everybody thought like, I was just so into it, man. Like everybody always was like, then I started like telling people about, helping people with their workouts. People would always invite themselves to work out with me and all that shit. And I was in it all the way through college, halfway through school. Like I was business degree for a year, and then I was pre-physical therapy for a year. And then my last 2 years, I switched over to like an exercise science degree, and I finished with that. And then out of school, I didn't really know what I was going to do. I had somebody invite me, basically offer me a job to work as a trainer. And I didn't have any idea, like even my perception of trainers. And I had trained up at school, like part-time, but you're just training other college students. I didn't know that personal trainers could actually like make a living. And I actually got around really good people that taught me like the business of personal training. So I was really just all into that. And I did, personal training full time. Like I worked into a management position, managed and developed trainers full time. And I did that basically until I was like 31. And it's when I was like 31 is when I moved up to MI40 and found social media and some people actually knew who I was. But prior to that, I competed the first time when I was 28. My whole thing is I just kind of knew like, that's a big thing you talk about. People get all this information in their head. Like from everyone I ever worked out with, like everybody got bigger and stronger faster than me. From like high school, like the kids would be doing the same workout as me and like getting stronger than me. I'd be leading the workout. I was like, kind of like, what the hell? And then when I went to college, it was the same thing. I remember literally I had like an RA. He invited himself to start working out with me. He'd never worked out a day in his life. And I literally remember like within like 5 or 6 months, he was like 40 pounds bigger than me and stronger than me on everything. And I was like, what the fuck is going on here? And so the funny thing is I had my first idea of like, and I joke too at Florida, it's a D1 school. I remember sitting in class next to like these kids that were like linebackers that were 18-year-old kids that are literally like bigger than I am right now, just like a lean 240. And I'm like, what the fuck? How am I 18 and how is that kid 18? And like the same thing, like all they ever did in high school, they do like bench press and deadlift and squat. And I'm like, all right, like that's when I kind of first got the wheels turning a little bit about genetics. And but the funny thing is like I think now like everybody looks around online and they're like, oh man, like I found out I have bad genetics. And like I found all these other people that have bad genetics. So fuck it, like that's just where I'm stuck. I've got bad genetics. And I just remember thinking like, well, I really like this, so I'm just going to stick with it and I'll eventually get somewhere. And so like it never really changed any of my actions. I just kept like grinding away and grinding away. And I just loved it. I still to this day, like I like the training part way more than the nutrition part, the dieting part, the even getting on stage part. And I thought I would never compete because I just liked that part. And I actually had a client that I just got like in amazing shape, like a guy that's close to 50. at the time, and just got him walking around, like 8% body fat year round. And was just like, hey, I've had kind of like a bucket list thing to compete. And he owned like an insurance company, was like, set. And he said, the only stipulation is you got to do the show with me. And I was like, fuck, all right. And so I thought about it for a while, and I kind of just told myself like, well, like I think I want to coach more like people. Cause the funny thing is he was the first person I ever coached. And I did this weird thing when I coached him. I told him that he was the first person I ever coached, which I joke now because nobody does that, right? Everyone just like, yeah, now I'm a prep coach. Because I even told him that. I was like, well, man, I've never actually prepped anybody. Like, do you trust me? He's like, yeah, I trust you. He's like, you got me at 8% just like every single day. He was a legit lean guy. And I got him shredded, like inside out shredded. And that's when I was like, well, I went through the whole process with him. And I kind of thought, well, if I'm going to do this, I should do it myself. I should actually like have transparency with people that like I work with of like how many people I've actually prepped or not prepped. And honestly, I loved it. I really thought it was going to be a one-off thing. But I've got that same thing, I think, in my brain that every bodybuilder does, where it's like, it was just such a definitive marker for me of like, where am I actually at? Right. Cause it's like, I'd be the same kid that was like, when I was trying to hit 200 pounds or 210 or 220 for the first time, like, I'd be 195, then I go drink like a gallon of milk and then be like, yeah, fuck yeah, I'm over 200. Where it's like, I'm not actually the first time you hit any of those weights, you're just, whatever it is bloated as fuck. And just, after you've had 17 meals and are holding in shits all day or something. So,
I remember my first 300.
Yeah.
It was not as pretty as like the 10 year later 300.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Big difference. Right. And, so like, I really like the fact that obviously like everybody says, like I'd obviously heard it and I'd loved bodybuilding. I'd followed bodybuilding, but like you do it yourself and you're like, okay, like when you're actually dieted down, wearing basically underwear the first time I bought the bodybuilding.com posing trunks. Cause I was like, posing trunks don't matter. They're all the same. So I wore like the black diapers for my first time on stage. And, but I loved it, man. Cause it's like, okay, here's where I'm actually at. Like, you dieted down, you lose way more weight than you think you're going to lose. And I was still fat relative to where I should be conditioning wise. But I just really liked having that marker. I was like, oh man, here's like a new actual marker for, am I actually changing or improving my physique? Or am I just kind of doing the same stuff that everybody else is doing? Yeah, so that's kind of my meathead story. And I honestly, I tell everybody, it's one of those things where it's like, it's a weird thing for me since I've transitioned to like, doing social media and shit, where it's just really weird people's perception of like the things that I do and why I compete and stuff like that. And, when people would actually talk about me competing and how I would do it shows, I'm like, I'm literally just doing this for fun. I'm like, it's like your mom running 5Ks. Like, I mean, I'm going to do it like 100% serious. I'm going to try and get better every single time. But I'm like, I do a show the first time I go and like I do shitty and I'm like, well, it's the first time I did that show. Like, that's my marker. I'll try and do next shitty less time. People are like, oh, I did shitty at the show. And I'm like, well, I didn't say I was going to do good. I've never said that anywhere. And so that's kind of the only weird thing. Obviously, you guys are actual bodybuilders, so you know this better than I do. But for me, it was kind of a weird thing where I just went from like obviously no one having any idea who I was and just doing my own shit. And then now obviously having an opinion on everything that you do and people that don't know you at all. So that's the internet, that's social media. So
what I got to ask you about when you were telling me your kind of timeline there. I want to ask about the MI40 phase, the period of time there. Can you tell us like how did you wind up hooking up with Ben and MI40 and how long were you actually there for?
Yeah. I'm trying to remember the exact year I met Ben. I knew who he was obviously, and I just kind of knew about him being like kind of the intelligent bodybuilder. I didn't know much past that. Actually, oddly enough, I met his fiance, worked at a club that I worked at when I was down in like Sarasota area. And just kind of from talking with her, I knew that he was going to be coming down to the Tampa area at some point in time. So basically I sought him out. I mean, I saw him at a gym at one point in time, and then I saw him at maybe the Tampa show or something. This might've been, I don't know, maybe 2011 or 12 or something like that. I honestly don't know exactly. And I kind of just invited myself to work out with him. So I talked to him for like, 10 or 15 minutes and we, had some commonalities of obviously having some sort of thought process to our training. And at that point in time, I kind of told him that I like to train hard, which I'm sure kind of Ben heard that shit all the time. But basically said, yeah, come and train and, we'll see what happens. And, if you don't know anything about Ben, like when you come and train with him for the first time, like he's going to try and like fucking murder you. And just act like it's normal. So the first couple of times I trained with him, he just fucking murdered me. But like my whole thing is like, he's a huge peer for me at that point in time. And I was like, I'm not going to say shit. I'm just going to get murdered and make sure that I don't stop at any point in time. So I just started like, I made it through the first workout. And then basically I didn't really know at the time, but he's like, he invited me back to train again. And he's like, oh, well, you weren't a pussy. You didn't bitch out. So you get to come train again. And so I probably, I just was training partners with him for probably 2 or 3 years. And I trained pretty much most consistently. I trained legs with them. So I was, an hour or so away. I'd drive up on the weekends and I'd train legs. I joked the first year or so I trained with them, I was basically just like, I would get destroyed and I'd take all week to recover. And then I'd basically be just ready to go again to come up and get fucking destroyed again. And it was great. I mean, honestly, I loved it. And so that's kind of, we first started as training partners. Obviously we trained some other body parts at some point in time. And then we knew some similar people that had done similar like certifications and stuff like that. So we actually did a couple certifications together and stuff. And then he kind of told me ahead of time about, having this plan, this idea to open MI40 and what he wanted it to be. So that was kind of my deal, is when I knew he was going to open it, I was going to come up and, relocate there to just kind of be a part of, what the idea of it was to be. And he was very transparent from the beginning, and I was fine with it. Whereas like, I'm just kind of opening it. We don't really know what's going to happen. It wasn't like, hey, here's this comfy position. Here's what you're going to be in, and it's going to be fucking great. It was just like, I kind of knew I had to go up and just like, sink or swim. And I tell everybody, like on paper, financially, it was like the worst decision of my life, because I was in a really, really comfy spot in Sarasota. I mean, I've been training in a similar area for 7-8 years. I had like a full client list. I was managing a club that was doing great. So I was extremely comfortable, but like I wanted to move on to something. Like I kind of just had this idea that I knew it could develop into something else. I had no idea what, but it was people that I wanted to be around and be a part of. So I moved my family. So at that point in time, I just had a son. I said on paper it was the worst time too. Like my wife had quit her job a year prior when my son was born, so we were just, we were making it work. And it was one of those things where like, I mean, I'm a pretty reasonable, level-headed guy. But I was like, man, on paper this is bad, but I really think it's like an opportunity I gotta take advantage of. So I literally joke, I had like, had my savings at that point in time. It's this weird thing that I had good advice growing up, was like save money. And so I had saved money, which was good, because I basically spent all my saved money in 6 months while like the gym was opening up before it was open. And I was like training clients out of it, people that I had brought in the gym before it opened. And then basically, while everything up there was great, I honestly loved the vast majority of my time there was way, way, way more positive than anything that kind of made me leave towards the end. But I was basically just constantly running out of money for I think I was there for almost 3 years. I don't know, 2.5, 3 years. Mm-hmm. And just because it was a performance-based thing, it was kind of, I just had to kind of bring my own people in. And so it was tough. I mean, it was a tough thing where it's just, like I said, financially tough, but I honestly liked it. I'm not the kind of person that stresses about that kind of stuff. So even like literally there were like, my wife and I still joke about it. There were 10 or 12 different times where my wife's like, okay, well, like we're out of money. So if you don't make a little bit more this week, we're fucked. And I'm like, it's good. I'll find somebody from somewhere. And it was literally like the only time in my life I probably lived like paycheck to paycheck, making it work. And then while I was up there, I kind of, that's the thing, is I had people talk me into doing social media. Cause I honestly, like, I just had this kind of I looked at all the negative stuff of it that everybody else did. And I was like, I don't want a fucking part of that. That's horrible. And then I had so many people that were just like, man, just like people want more information from you, just like start doing it. And, so I was like, all right, I literally had like my coworkers at the time, my training partner, still one of my best friends, Bryce, was at the gym at that point in time. And I literally was like, okay, show me how to do this. And I remember him showing me like the whole Instagram. I was like, man, you have like 1,000 followers. Like, where'd you get them? Like, how does that work? And I literally
how do you know 1,000 people?
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I was literally like, because I was like, man, well, I don't understand how people find people and do stuff. I still don't really understand how it works. And because sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And so I just started putting shit. And I even remember now I have one business partner that I've been kind of doing everything with, that helps me with everything with my site, my app. And he was one of these people that was encouraging me from the beginning. Like, actually was just we weren't partners. He had no real agenda for it. I had helped him with some stuff with training, and he had helped me with stuff with social media. And he was like, just start putting stuff out, just talk the way you talk, and, put a camera on stuff. And so I remember I started doing stuff. And I remember like right after my first couple posts, he's like, man, I'm just going to tell you, like, your posts are really long. And I'm like, yep. And he's like, man, I'm just telling you, I don't know if people want to read anything that long. A lot of words. Yeah. And I was like, well, I'm like, man, because I honestly, prior to this, I've always had various outlets in my life where I actually like writing. I'm the type of person where it's like, I like public speaking. I used to be, I don't know, maybe it's just being an asshole, or I used to be more arrogant, or who knows what. Like, I would like trying to like entertain a crowd of people. Like, I remember at jobs I used to work at, I used to love that shit. Like, we had like competitive stuff between different clubs and stuff. And I used to just get up and I'd turn these things into like joking shit talk, and like just ragging on other managers I was friends with, and ragging on other clubs and other trainers and shit that I knew. And most people that are like, you get guys that are confident and competitive, like they would love that shit. And so I kind of always liked writing and making shit funny. So I was like, well, I have a way that I kind of know I like to write and like to talk, and I'm just going to keep doing that. And So anyway, people liked my long shit. If you look back from a billion years ago, I mean, my posts have always been long, and they've been long because one, I want to half make it entertaining, but two is that accuracy thing. It's the same thing. If you guys have a guy, anybody asks you a question like, hey man, how do I get big arms? It's like, fuck, you know, do you have like 3 hours? Let's sit down. You know, it's like, if you want to paint the whole picture, you know, you can, and then you get that, man. It's so weird now that when I have people come and talk to me at things and I've got like 5 minutes to talk to somebody, you know, it's that balance of like, I really genuinely want to help people, but I'm only going to give you an incomplete picture like in 5 minutes. So that's when I started posting and all that kind of stuff, and people liked it. And that's the funny thing with everything now. Everybody wants to try and like make a living online and do all that shit, whatever that means. People ask me like, well, how'd you do this? How'd you do that? And I was like, well, people always ask for something. I was like, it's this weird thing where I had a demand and then I filled the demand. So people like, you know, I started doing Instagram and I had people ask for more content. They're like, well, you should do more, like do stuff that's like, we want videos that are longer and this and that. And I had a client at that point in time that's actually, you need to do, she told me, she's like, you need to do a pay site. You need to have a site, like people are doing that now where they have like a membership site and you can just go on there and put all the shit you want on. You can rant for an hour and people will want it. So I was like, fuck, all right. I had no money. And she was in a separate thing of the fitness industry, but she was in IT. And she's like, I'll build your website for you for free. And I was like, well, fucking sweet. All right, sign me up for that. And so anyway, she helped me build it for free. I had my now business partner kind of help come along with me after that. He kind of looked at the site and was like, okay, he had dealt more in the fitness industry. And it's like, here's the way that people like stuff. And again, help me with the whole IT side. Cause like, I honestly don't know shit. I don't know how to do anything. And so basically that was it. Like I kind of built my website. I'd literally like lean my phone on like a fucking shaker and have it from like 20 feet away. And I'd do an exercise and then I'd talk over the videos and stuff. And that's how I kind of built like my little site, my app. And then I just, when people would ask for stuff, I'd just do more stuff. So I start trying to do the YouTube page, try and do whatever. And, I never really thought, I mean, to be honest, I mean, I love it. I love everything about social media and Instagram and all that because it allows me to make income that doesn't require all of my time. Because even when my first son was born, I was working 70 hours a week. And I mean, I like that. But as soon as my son was born, I was like, fuck, I can't do this. I honestly, the first year he was alive. I mean, it was like, I didn't do anything but work and hang out with him, but I missed a lot. I mean, I was at work every day at like 5 or 5:30 a.m. Lots of days I wouldn't get home till like, 6 or 7. And that's a lot. That's a lot of missed stuff. So I was really grateful for the opportunity. I was like, okay, well, I don't actually, because trainers, obviously, it's like you're either training somebody in person or you're not. Yeah. And you're either making money or you're not. And I thought about it ahead of time. I was like, I was making more money and managing a club was better. It would give me another source of income. But honestly, obviously, when I was like, holy crap, I can have a way of like making some income where it's the same thing. I mean, people would pay me X amount of dollars an hour for my brain. Obviously, they'd get the one-on-one in person, all that. But now you're just getting the $10 version of it, and where it's, again, that's the thing I like about it is it's pretty, there's no fucking mystery about, my website or my app or anything that I do. It's like, okay, if you like this stuff, you can pay a little bit of money and get more for it. And worst case scenario, you go on, you're like, oh, this is fucking horrible. I hate it. And I'm like, well, you can cancel it. Or you can just, if anybody even asks, I've had people like, oh, can you refund this? I didn't like this. I'm like, of course. Like, I'll just like refund anybody that wants refunded. I mean, like, the goal is for it to be a shit ton of information for really, really cheap. And it's it's not a complicated business model. It's like hopefully helps a lot of people. And then, it's an income that I can make not having to just train people all the time. Yeah. So that was at my 40. I mean, honestly, and aside from that, I tell everybody, I mean, at the end of it, Ben and I just had kind of professional differences and, in my opinion, handled everything like grownups. I mean, we kind of worked through some stuff a couple of times, talking in person, face to face. And then just kind of at the end, I was like, well, I'm going to try to do my own thing. And because we just couldn't quite come to terms on exactly how we wanted to do stuff. And, we're still on fine terms now. And, but the whole time there, man, it was great. I always say Ben's the person that I learned the most about how to actually train hard from. And, we trained fucking hard the whole time I was up there. I mean, that's literally like, that's the thing is, obviously everyone knows Ben and knows Ben's legs. And if you can train legs with Ben for, 5, 6, 7 years, it's kind of like another level of, what you're trying to do in intensity. So, but overall it was a really good environment to be around, good people to be around. And again, I'm still good friends and my training partner was there and, he's training where I am now as well too. And overall, very, very good experience, man. Yeah.
When I threw your photo up, Dusty threw it up too, right? Yep. This morning. You get a bunch of questions, Dusty?
Yeah, I got a bunch and I'm always amazed because everyone knows who you are. But it's interesting the array of questions. Like I can only imagine what you must get behind closed doors. Yeah. Because I get very intricate questions where I'm like, yeah, that's a question I would ask. And then I get, what does he think about Joe Smith? And I'm like, he doesn't give a fuck. Like, what? Yeah. I'm not asking him that. Like, it just blew my mind a little bit. But I did want to mention one thing that you brought up just because I think it's beneficial to everyone following is I get people all the time that'll ask. In fact, I just had it on I throw up Ask Me Anything probably twice a week. And I had someone ask me the other day, how do I essentially become someone in the industry? And you nailed it so perfectly that I hope people caught that. It's do you, and the market will decide.
Yeah.
You know, like you broke all the rules, so to speak. Your posts were too long.
Yeah.
They're too intricate. They're too boring. They're too whatever.
Yeah.
But then everyone wanted more, you know, and Dante does the same thing. I taught him Instagram this year.
Yeah.
And it was a painful hour on the phone talking to the smartest person I know.
Yeah.
And thinking like, how can he not fucking know this? You are so much smarter than me. And his whole thing, I remember the very first post, he texted me, he goes, we have a problem. I'm like, what? He goes, there's not enough words.
Yeah. Not enough space.
I was like, what do you mean? He goes, I'm full. What do I do?
Yeah.
I was like, okay, go into your notes on your phone and just keep writing. He goes, there's going to be a problem. I go, it's you. It won't fucking matter.
Yeah, no.
People will read whatever you write.
Yeah.
So
I noticed Dante has the post and then he has the first 2 comments.
Yeah.
He'll even tell people,
comments,
don't fucking comment until I put these posts.
Yeah, just wait till I get them up. Yeah. Don't comment till I get that copy paste in there. Yeah.
You know, but seriously, I mean, I just wanted to point that out because I think, you know, the market does decide, and it's key that people get that, because if not, you're going to have a guy like me come along and go, oh, I got to do what Joe Bennett's doing. I can't possibly. I would forget what I was typing about if I wrote that much detail. Yeah. I'm like, oh, that's heavy. Pick it up. Yeah. Okay, now keep doing that until you can't. Yeah. Something's going to happen. Yeah. For sure.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, Ron, hit us with a couple questions. I'm going to pull some up here as well.
Okay, well, I got like Dusty said, there's some you know, big ones and there's some heavy ones. I'm going to ask this one. I'm going to ask this one right off the bat because I got this from 2 people. Mm-hmm. And it said, well, I'll read. Shanzi Gets Fit here asked, what was it like to work with Dallas? And what was your favorite memory of him?
Oh, man. Yeah, that's a good one. It was awesome. I mean, it was awesome. Because I always say it's, to be honest, you know, a professional passion that I have, you know, as I want to work with the best athletes, the best bodies on the planet. So obviously at some point in time, I don't know anybody, right? So I didn't know Dallas, but, you know, I'd be lying if I had said I just wasn't excited to work with, the Dallas that everybody saw before you knew him or if you didn't know him. So I was pumped for that part. But I mean, Dallas is just, I mean, the same thing everybody says about him. He's just a great guy. He's a class act. I still tell people a couple times, I've said this a couple times, maybe, I don't know if I've told it, but like the first time, you know, when I was, I kind of got introduced. I got introduced through him and Aaron, and I just told Aaron, man, I'll, you know, reach out to him and see if he'd be cool just getting on the phone with me, you know, and because I honestly think like looking at the same as anybody is like, I don't want, you know, anything. I don't want, like, I have this whole thing. I don't like the idea of being anyone's coach. I mean, if people that I work with in person long enough want me to help them with stuff, I'd be happy to continue helping with them, like people that I help now. But at that point in time, I was like, I don't want him to think that I want to take over anything or do anything. I literally just think there's some things maybe I could help him with and take it or leave it. That's kind of just my approach most of the time. And so he's, you know, agreed to talk on the phone to me. I don't even remember what the hell we talked about for a long period of time, but it's like, yeah, I definitely want to come over and train with you. So the first time we trained, I think he was like 6 or 7 weeks out from the Olympia. And, you know, he came over and I remember he's on the way, you know, and he called me super polite, like really apologetic that he was going to be late. And he was late because of all the filming crew and everybody else. And it's like, he was like, you know, coming from Boca, he's like 15 minutes late. And I don't want to be like, hey, bro, you know, I kind of cleared my day for you, but it's okay. Played it cool, acted like it wasn't a big deal that he was coming over to train. And no, honestly, man, he was awesome. I mean, if I have my favorite memories, honestly, the first couple sessions I got to work with him were great. Because it's the funny thing, man, the actual people that are hardcore, that work their asses off, that have the best physiques in the world, generally are the ones that tend to be the most receptive to actually listen to me talk. Because that's the thing I think a lot of people miss is like behind closed doors. I always ask anybody if I'm going to do a session with them. I was like, well, what do you want to do today? Like, you know, do you want me to just, what did you have planned today? If you want, we can just go through exactly what you had planned. And if I feel like I have something to add to your already existing workout, fine. And then some people are like, no, man, you just take me. Like, I'm a clean slate. Just take me through whatever the hell you want to take me through and kind of see what sticks. And so that's the kind of stuff as we went through sessions. It was like, here's why I do this, or here's why I put this in this position or change this. And kind of, man, if you think something's stupid or you don't see any benefit, you know, tell me, or just tell me I'm not going to mess with that or whatever it is or that kind of deal. And dude, he was super receptive and seemed pretty much into everything we said. We trained back one day, we trained legs another day. and just had a good relationship after that. I mean, the nice part is like once you get to know him, like I'm a relatively private person. I mean, I like to be transparent because, you know, on social media, I just like to talk about stuff that's important to me. So if I feel like talking about fucking nerd shit, I'm going to talk about nerd shit. If I feel like talking about my kids, I'm going to talk about my kids. You know, but I don't, you know, I'm kind of private with like, you know, making new friends, as silly as that sounds. And Dallas is kind of the same way. A lot of people are. So we reach grown-up age. You're not just walking around at Walmart trying to like make new friends. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And, but he's just, you know, it's like the kind of thing obviously within the industry is you can't avoid how much commonality you have with everybody, right? Like we've all got the same mental problems. We all find enjoyment in training hard. You all find enjoyment. Like I joke, aside from training hard, we're like a bunch of retired people. We just like to stay in our groove and like go to the grocery store and sit on the fucking couch and don't do shit. I'm like, we're going to all ease into retirement real fucking easy.
I'm halfway there.
Yeah, exactly.
There, man.
Yeah. And
I get it. Yeah.
So that's some of my favorite stuff, man, especially when we had times when we had off season. Because honestly, training would just go like sometimes it'd be like, hey, you do the workout, and same as, you know, when you train with somebody, it was like you pick an exercise, and aside from little things here and there, you know, it was just like everyone just wanted to train really hard. And then the rest of the time was just my favorite sort of like doing nothing, like just go sit at his house and eat a shit ton of food and watch stupid shit on TV and just hang out and chill. So, you know, and I look at the times, obviously it was a really cool environment and culture. Like I met Flex for the first time through Dallas, training at his gym, obviously in Boca. Been lucky enough to stay really good friends with Flex because he's, again, one of those just all around awesome people. So that's just something like, I'll always look at those times of just epic, like the times when all three of us would train, or when Matt would come down and train and he'd be down for a few days, or whoever was in town, everybody would just train together. And obviously the last time I was over there, it was me, Matt, and Josh was over there training, you know, right before the Olympia. Yeah, so nothing but awesome, man. Like every way you could imagine awesome, from just clicking really easy in the gym. And then just like normal shit, like I said, like a lot of people think it's like I'm going to sit down and be like, let's draw some equations and talk about shit and get my protractor out in the middle of the session. And, you know, it's easy. It's little stuff, man. Most of my stuff boils down to either how do we make this harder where you can notice it and feel it right now? Or potentially if I try and explain something, it's being like, hey, here's why maybe this movement done for the next 10 years, you might not feel issues now, but I could foresee based on your structure and how this fits you or doesn't fit you, maybe do this instead. You know, so there's a couple things where there's a degree of trust where people is like, you know, try this over this. And especially when that's the thing too, if you get somebody like Dallas, you know, same with someone like Phil or whatever. It's like, you know, if I'm looking at like his arm training, I'm like, fuck, just do anything that doesn't wreck your elbows, because your arms are going to grow. You know what I mean? And you need your elbows to grow your back and to grow your chest and shit like that.
Right. So you're thinking long term, because you know you're working with a guy that's got the genetics to do everything. And
for sure, yeah.
It's the time issue. Yeah.
Yeah, and I get questions like that sometimes where it's like that's why I really don't like to be like, it's too late. It's too late in the game now to do it, but I could change my name to hypertrophy consultant. Because I joke that's kind of more my role is. Honestly, I like the idea of a consulting role where it's like, you guys know it more than I do. There's great coaches in the industry that I think really, really just want to help people and just be a part of helping people and do it for all the right reasons. And there's people that do it because they want a certain, they do something because they want something in return, whether they even know it or not, where if they don't get their level of credit, or if they don't get credit for this or whatever it is, it's, oh, I'm part of this team, I'm part of that. You know, and there's nothing to be wrong with obviously athletes that appreciate their coaches and things like that. But at the same time, it's like, I don't want any of that, because I just feel like if I feel like I'm owed something in return, or if I feel like people wanted to give me credit for like, oh, well, what did you actually do for this person's physique or that's physique? Like, you know, sometimes I can't even say if I did anything or not. I'm like, well, I think 10 years from now, his elbows are going to thank me. Who the fuck knows? And then
called
sometimes
me back. That's what I always look at. I'm like, if you get the call back, something must be okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's the thing is, honestly, with people that, you know, the people that I work with on a regular basis, it's like, again, the conversations behind closed doors, you know, it's like, man, I don't like this. You know, if I say I think this is a good place for them to start, and I'm like, well, I'd rather do this. I'm like, okay, cool, let's do that instead. And with rare exception, there's times where I'm like, man, like this, I would really avoid this, or I'd really change this, or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so Dallas honestly was like the epitome of, I mean, everything enjoyable for me personally and professionally, with, you know, just an awesome athlete to work with, just really kind of just selfless and not a big ego and just happy to learn. And again, as you become friends with somebody, happy to be like, I don't want to do that, or I do want to do that, or whatever. And that's what I joke with everybody, is people get confused. Like, the people I have a hard time relating to in the industry that are the ones that make too big of a deal of everything, where I'm like, I just don't, why would I want to argue about this like subtle nuance or this exercise or whatever? Like, it's just fucking working out, you know, like take it or leave it. And if somebody thinks that something specific I do is dumb, I'm like, I don't care at all. I could be less concerned or less attached to specifics than anything,
right.
you know? So
yeah. I had a question. I wanted to ask you about quad training.
Yeah.
You know, I ruptured a quad tendon almost 3 years ago, coming up on my 3-year anniversary. I got my leg back up to size and everything like that.
Yeah.
But, you know, since the injury, you know, I've been really focusing on just training smarter.
Yeah.
And, you know, I mean, I'm retired from competing, so it's like, do I need to squat 5 plates for reps or hack squat fucking whatever the fuck. So, you know, I've been really like focusing on quad domination for foot placement, which, you know, I did a lot while I was competing too, but a lot more now. Yeah. Do you think there's a point where you're like, let's say you're leg pressing? I always kind of use a rule of thumb, like as long as your heels don't lift, you're fine. But do you have any other thing that you go by? Like, is there a spot where you're too quad dominant and you're not using enough glutes, you become unstable? Like, how do you kind of think when you think of that stuff?
Yeah, that's a tough question. You know, it's one of those things where I have this.
Like with your safety bar squats with the elevated heel.
Yep.
Like, where do you draw the line for, like, you know, do you just go as high as you can till you become like the verge of being unstable, or is it a structural thing? Like, how are you thinking with that sort of stuff?
Oh, so again, specifically, so if we're looking at something where I'm setting something up to be more quad dominant or less glute dominant, you know, there's a part of me that wants to say, if you're doing everything right, there's not like an exact amount of what's too much quads or what's too little glute or something like that. But that being said, you know, it's just nobody does anything perfect, you know, and bodybuilding is a sport of extremes. And depending on what you're trying to do, I honestly think there's some point where I can't, you know, there's just a line where I guess on paper I would say, you know, you're just going to be at a higher risk for injury, period. You know, and I don't like, and if I really, you know, if I was drawing fucking graph and shit and stuff, and I could make the arguments for, you know, like a knee dominant squat technically is more shear on the knees than a hip dominant squat. And again, I say the word shear is like every exercise ever has shear as a component, and shear is a response from your body. And so it'd be really hard for me to draw a line in the sand of saying, okay, well, this is the amount of shear that is too much, you know, where it's like, there's something I would say, you know, if someone can grow their quads with kind of more of an even squat, then do more of an even squat. But if it's bodybuilding and quads are a lagging body part, and the only way you can get your quads to go is just to make them do more work, then technically, if you go over the course of career and someone can grow, you know, more quads with less shear, and somebody has to push it with more shear, with being more quad dominant, then technically I'd have to say you're just going to be at a little bit of a higher risk for injury. And because again, it's one of those things, bodybuilding is so extreme with how much load, how much volume, the amount of repetition, how often we train, that again, part of me would like to say that if you're doing everything perfect, there's not an amount, like, again, how big can muscles get? How big can tendons get? You know, how much force and load can things take? But then stuff with just, you know, bone on bone surfaces. I mean, I think literally every movement of every joint, there can be some degree of deterioration of cartilage, you know, so it's a tough thing, man. And it's one of those things where it's, I honestly, you know, you look to avoid extremes, I guess, you know, when you have somebody like, again, I hate to use like the Ronnie Coleman example, but it's like, you know, if you break your back doing an exercise, maybe don't keep doing that exercise. Where if you're dealing with some itis, you know, if I've got some tendonitis, some quaditis, whatever it is, it's like, well, if triceps are a lagging body part for you and you just got to fucking blast them, you need more of something. There's no way to do that without just getting more force through that tendon. And again, how much is that tendon going to last? It's the same as anything else. I mean, some people I just think have like fucking bulletproof tendons and they can just wail away on certain things and never have issues. And some people can't, you know, so like that whole area, I mean, I think it's one of the most interesting areas to talk about because it is a gray area. You know, there's part of me that's like, well, if we really nerd out enough, we'll be safe. But then there's the part of me just knowing how extreme it is to, like, you know, grow. Again, if we're talking, anybody can have big quads and I think have healthier knees for it, you know, and have healthy knees for the period of their life. But if you're literally talking like world-class quads, you know, unless you're literally like a genetic freak of nature, like, it's a brutal amount of work, you know, and it's a lot to expect and to kind of put through your body. So I think everything at the end of the day really is just about, you know, minimizing risk as much as possible.
Right.
And just realizing that, you know, you're not training in this safe little bubble, like shit's going to happen when you're pushing stuff really, really far, you know?
Right.
Yeah, for sure. I got a question here from the True Dark Knight. I'm interested to hear what you have to say because I know you have your own setup. What do you consider must-have equipment for a home gym?
Oh, for a home gym. Well, again, it depends on who's training there. But I mean, obviously, you just got to have a power rack. It's the basic stuff. It's power rack. I would have multiple barbells. So obviously, have a barbell, have a Swiss bar, have dumbbells, however heavy a dumbbells you need. I think that's the basics I would start with from there. And then
I think a double cable stack, like.
Yeah, if I would go somewhere next, I'd be like, if the big things you're going to pick, I would pick either a cable stack would probably be the next thing for upper body. And then if I was going next equipment, depending on the person, the goal, it probably actually, if I was going to go equipment, it may be like depends on the person. I might literally go with like a leg curl first, or something that you can do some sort of leg curl on, and then maybe go with something like a hack or a squat.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so individual dependent, right? I mean, so it's like, again, can you have a great physique just having a power rack and a barbell and plates? Like, yeah, of course you can. But then it's like, again, if you're talking someone that just wants to be fit, someone who wants to have decent muscle. But then again, if there's some of those things where it's like they're hard semantically to train with free weights, again, like looking at hamstrings or looking at like, again, even some arm stuff or some shoulder stuff, then it's where there's the benefits of doing like, again, having some cables or having some machines. So
what do you think about, I noticed like take a machine like the Cybex squat press.
Yeah.
That you have in your gym, right? And I'm a huge fan of that machine because it's got that loading curve on it.
Yeah.
But I noticed you also band that.
Yeah.
So with a guy like me who's over 6 feet, if I put my feet low on that, it gets super, super heavy at the top because those plates come right out. They actually go like horizontal to the floor. Yeah. Like the arm comes right out. So
for sure, yeah.
I don't feel like I need to band that. Or would you still band it if you were tall like me? Because it would get crazy heavy at the top. Or is that kind of for shorter people you use that band?
The first answer, the lame answer, which I'll expand on, is it depends. But if I had to do a blanket rule, like the longer your legs are, the more it's already going to overload for sure. And the thing, there's two things about like, so that falls in the profile category, which everybody hates when you say the word profile or whatever. But again, like pressing movements are really, really easy. Like everybody fucking knows it. They're super hard at the bottom and they're easy at the top. So it's just as simple as just making it harder as you go through the movement. And I think the best gauge that I give people on that, especially people that know how to train, is how do your failure reps look? And that's the gauge of would I tweak or adjust this profile?
Okay.
And so I would make the argument that for very sciencey, nerdy reasons, now it's a combination of when you hit failure reps, it's the amount of load that you're using, it's the amount of fatigue you've already accumulated, but it's how slow the rep is unintentionally. Like when you're trying to push or press as hard or you want to use fast, but if you're trying to push as hard as humanly possible and it's a fucking snail pace the whole time, that's like perfect. Like my failure rep, I would literally want from the bottom to be like, I'm going to die. Like literally the same pace. You don't want to get to that point where it's like, I'm going to die. And in the last half, you kind of pop up and through, if you kind of have that feeling on any movement, that would be an indication, in my opinion, that you maybe want to add more to the top, or overload the top.
And if it looks like I'm a guy, and then they just slam into a wall halfway up, that would maybe be too much profile.
Yeah, absolutely, maybe too much. Yeah, and there's you could for me that's where there's a balance. You could really fucking nerd and figure out, percentages and shit and calculate for different limb lengths and all that kind of stuff. But it's not. I mean, for me, the thing that makes the most sense now, again, it has to be like the thing with that is if I'm not working with someone in person. That really only works pretty well for like a trained individual, because it's again, for the average person, most people are just trying to like get out of doing hard work, right? Where they're just going to bail out. They don't really know, like even with people that are trained, like when I've like in the past and working with myself, when I'm trained with Ben, when we kind of like fix the profile on something and the first couple of times you do it, it's so fucking horrible that you don't realize how like acclimated you are. Like you've trained yourself to like, okay, once I just get here, whether you think it or not, I'm fucking good. And then the first couple of times you fix it and you just like still have to fucking grind. It's like you even get that little bit of like deer in the headlights. Like, oh my God, I'm not used to this here of this still being fucking horrible.
Like the hack squat. Yeah.
Yeah. Like the hack squat or even pressing movements, anything for even upper body stuff as well too. And so it's one of those things where I think that's the easiest, like in the gym way to say, like, is this a good profile or could I make it harder or is it too hard somewhere? That type of thing is like literally like your last rep, like pace, I think is a very good tool to use.
Right. Right. Okay. And one more before I turn you over to Dusty for a bit here. I like how this guy, this Brant Dunn, I like how he worded this. Best training style for someone with outrageously long and extremely stubborn arms.
Yeah, well, that's me. I mean, there's no magic to it. I mean, I think there's funny is I've seen guys that make it. I mean, I get it. You're trying to find a niche. There's guys in bodybuilding that try and have like bodybuilding for tall guys. Like that's their niche. And I'm like, there's nothing to write. You're like, it just fucking sucks, right? It takes longer.
It's not much of a pay website.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. It's that, and it really does. I mean, that's all there is. And there's like a double component to it, right? Like if your arms are long, you could technically, like, that's the thing. If like people don't realize, like, some of these little fucking T-Rex arms and someone with an arm this long, you could have someone that has twice as much weight, biceps and triceps, and actually measure like the same circumference. But then also there's like this component of like visually, people don't know like the ratio, the ratio of length to how thick it is. Like you've seen it, guys with tall guys that have 20, 21 inch arms, but they look small because they're like 6 foot whatever. And I'm like, well, technically 21 inch arm isn't small, but it looks fucking small on that guy. Then you have another guy that's 5'2" with these little baby arms and they look fucking massive, but they could be 19 inch arms. So, I mean, with any lagging body part, I mean, again, today, if you got super monkey, I mean, my arms are super fucking long. I think people are just unwilling sometimes to prioritize body parts, like really prioritize body parts. I say just the sheer nature of assuming you're already at your limits of how much you can recover, then you can't add something without taking something away. Like the bodybuilding world, and I've done it, it's just like, oh, fucking just keep adding. Like, that's it. I just keep adding on top and I'll be good. Where it's like, oh, I want to bring up, yes. The funny thing too is you ask an average person, like what their lagging body parts. They're like, oh, chest, yeah, and triceps, oh, and hamstrings. Yeah, and probably quads too. Can I program for that? And I was like, well, you can't program for 4 priority body parts at the same time, And so the biggest thing is some people aren't willing to do is like, you might have to not train something for a period of time or train at something stupid like once a month, maybe even. And then just as a result of the more recovery you're going to gain from not training something, then just up the frequency on something else.
So total systemic recovery would be something you'd look at.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And especially depending on the person you're talking to. I mean, if it's like, there's you always, if I'm actually with a person in person, like I always look at how they're doing things first. Like I always say, if you're going to address all these other variables, like it all starts with 1 rep. So if guy says I can't grow my arms, and I look in and see all of his form and everything's like shit, then it's like we might not change his program at all. Like let's just actually get your form on point here, and then obviously once we have form, there's something progressive occurring, and then that might fix it in and of itself. But the assumption is, normally more of my demographic is people that are a little further along their journey. They've hopefully kind of address some of those things. And then from there, it's just I see a lot of people unwilling to actually create kind of different splits to actually address their body, where it's like people still have this mindset of I have to follow this certain type of split. And it's like, well, if you really want to, balance your physique, that might not be the case.
What would be the most you'd train something in a week, like maximum priority?
Yeah. As often as it can recover. So it's always individual. Like I say, if I have someone that really has a lagging body part, I will see how often, like what's the frequency of recovery for that first. So let's assume they're training hard. Let's assume they're training everything's the way it should be. Then literally just see, okay, well, some of it's obviously based on feedback and soreness and stuff like that. So we use that as the first gauge. Then we say, okay, if you're good 3 days later, we're doing this 3 days later. And then we actually see, are they making progress within their workouts? So some of it is obviously their feel or perception of soreness. And then some of it, more importantly, is progress within their workouts. So theoretically, if you could train something every other day, and some body parts can do that. I think biceps can do that. I think delts can do that. I think calves can do that, depending.
Right.
But that's just how it would start. So obviously with like legs or something, if you're really training them hard, you can't train them every other day, right? Right. So it depends on that. But that's literally, I think most people make the mistake is like, what's your lagging body part? And build your split around that first. Literally, here's my one body part. Here's how if I'm training it, balls out, and everything's doing good, and I'm making progress, that I do it this day, then this day, then this day, and then fill in the blanks with everything else.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah.
Go for it, Dusty.
That's a big hole, I think, that you nailed there, too, is I did that a couple of years ago where we were training quads. I would blanket it and say 3 days a week.
Yeah.
Give or take, because some weeks you'd go to that day you're supposed to hit them, and it's like, not today.
Yeah, exactly.
But during that time, I didn't train back once.
Yeah.
Because it was just like, well, that's another huge body part. And for me, it's a body part that it could shrivel down to nothing and 6 weeks later be blown out as soon as I jump back on it. So that's key, because I literally just had someone ask that question the other day was how often? And I was like, well, what are we taking away? Because that's the thing. No, like you said, no one wants to do that. It's like they have their set program. They're like, okay, I just need a 9th day of the week.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Right.
Yeah. So, but this is actually a good one. A little not quite as in the wheelhouse, but I think it's a good option. Does having hypothyroidism have an effect on muscle building in any capacity?
Yeah, that's definitely out of my wheelhouse. I mean, I would say it would have to. But fuck, I mean, honestly, that's out of my wheelhouse. I would just say, like, with that kind of stuff, I mean, the funny thing is, like, I've gotten away from the reason I don't prep anybody or anything is, you know, like my information, even having some classes and schooling on it with anything with nutrition or hormones. I mean, I joke, it's fucking Google level. It's the same as everybody else.
Google level, I like that.
Yeah,
Google level.
which is
stealing that for life, just so you know.
Yeah, and again, the joke is some of that's not bad. I mean, if you want to do shit on yourself, Google level is fine. But, you know, it's one of those things where if I have, that's the funny thing, like I always say, I say it not being a dick, but if I say, like, do this exercise, or I prefer this over that, like, I've got all the reasons all the way down. Like, if somebody wants to ask me 8 more questions to it, I can answer it because I don't do anything with what I consider a solid principle base. If somebody asks me things about nutrition or fucking drugs or thyroid problems, I could be like, well, here's what I would think Google says. And they ask me a follow-up question. And I'm like, fuck, I don't know. I mean, I only clicked on one article on Google. I didn't click on 2. You know, so honestly, not any thyroid, I mean, the answer I would think is I would think it would have to, you know, I think it would have to make it harder. But that's as much as my answer is going to go on that one.
No, I think it's good, though, because I think you actually just nailed an important thing, which is we talked about this with Aceto. Yeah. I don't know is a powerful answer.
Yeah, yeah.
Because in this industry, no one can say that. I should say probably every industry, but I'm pigeonholed, so this is the only thing I see is no one wants to say that. I mean, to me, the answer is the same. I'm like, well, of course it does. Why?
Yeah.
Well, it has to. It's not perfect.
Yeah, yeah, right.
You know, I mean, why? I'm not really sure. But all right, so this question is actually more along the lines of what we were just talking about. Training a somewhat sore muscle, occasionally okay, or will this stall your progress eventually?
Yeah. What's your take on soreness? I get asked this. I was the type of guy. I mean, I say all the time. I kind of grew up like training Dorian style my whole career. Basically, I was always sore. Yeah. Every fucking workout, every back workout, every chest, every leg. I would do leg day and be sore for 3-4 days every week for 25 years. Yeah. Is that fucked up?
No, I honestly would say so. I had somebody ask me this question recently too. And it's a good question. I mean, I would honestly say the blanket statement is, again, I'm answering this like, let's say there's 1,000 people, 10,000 people hear the answer. The answer is soreness means nothing in and of itself. Right. But it means something individually, right? So at the end of the day, people don't want this answer because people don't keep track of this stuff. And it's the real. So whenever anybody says, well, what about this one thing? And I say, well, let's do this one thing and then see what happens. People want to skip the see what happens part because at the end of the day, I know for a fact, I know for a fact, a lot of people that can train and they're a little bit sore and then they just train through it. And what are the 2 long-term markers for progress? Like, are you progressing within your workouts? And then 2, are you actually adding lean tissue? And whether you're doing that from an accurate fucking DEXA scan, I don't care, or just by pictures are obviously great. The pictures scale the way that everybody tracks stuff. So anything can, like, so I would say in general, can you train when you're a little bit sore? Somebody can for sure. And they're doing those things. They're a little bit sore, but they still make progress within their workouts and they're still progressing their physique. But for someone else, just because of how their body, like there's obviously what can affect soreness could be like a 2-hour-long conversation. I mean, obviously, technically everything that goes into recovery and who knows what, obviously for an individual, someone could improve their recovery and now their soreness markers change. But assuming whatever someone's doing is their recovery is what it is, you know, then there's both answers to that, right? So again, in general, yes, it's possible you could train when you're sore sometimes and be absolutely no big deal at all. But there's some people, if they train when they're sore, they know that they're not fully recovered. That soreness actually does reflect their recovery and their ability to actually train that body part again. And they could start going backwards. Obviously, their performance could be bad, you know, and they could stop making progress. So the tough thing with soreness is like, it means something for an individual, right? Like if you guys have been training long enough, like, you know that you might not have to be sore, but like, it's the same for me. Like, I know when I'm like, based on what I just did, I'll probably be a little bit sore, or based on the fact that I'm kind of in this great groove. My recovery is a fucking 10 out of 10 and I'm making progress. I'll have other things that they just don't get sore, but I know that I'm getting stronger and I know my body's changing. You know, so soreness is a very, very individual thing. But again, as far as a blanket statement for everybody, it means nothing, right? You know, it could mean something or it could mean nothing. So
soreness sucks though, because it's like, I always gauge everything back to bodybuilding. The 3 of us sitting here, the amount of information you have on understanding bodybuilding is through the roof. And you still find yourself falling in these holes where you'll have a brutal workout and then the next day you're not sore and you're kind of like,
oh yeah, what happened? Yeah, right. Exactly,
and you know it doesn't mean shit, but you're still kind of like, I was kind of hoping to hobble around today.
I definitely think I know for a fact, just from like, you know, when you have an injury, so you can't do certain movements for a little while. I know that it's all the stretch movements that really cause soreness in myself.
Yeah.
Like if I skip a stretch movement because of whatever, there's not as much soreness in there.
Yeah.
So I definitely feel like that's a component of getting sore. But should you like train a certain way just to make yourself sore?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's like some people feel like they have to be sore, but
yeah. I think
what it gauges back with though is what Luke talked about, and I think this is actually cool to get your take on. Was athletes in general, they get strong on certain things.
Yeah.
Meaning, I can, high pull X amount of weight, but then to me, and like Luke mentioned as well, if you want to be a great bodybuilder, you want to be strong in general, which means you can high pull a ton of weight. You can also do a pull up with a ton of weight or a pull down and a ton of weight. And so I'll tell guys all the time, well, if you're obsessed with soreness, go do a different Smith machine incline press.
Yeah.
You'll be sore because you've only trained one way. You trained your muscle to be sore in this perfect wheelhouse at this gym. I mean, Ron knows I'm always crying when we're on the road because the equipment's all different. Yeah. Which when I say crying, it's a happy crying because I'm getting my ass kicked. Because all the equipment is just slightly different, and I'm going at it at the same workout. So I think that I am curious. What are your thoughts on the correlation of strength and growing?
Yeah, I mean, so overall, like it's always going to be, like you said, it's going to be relative to the individual, right?
Yeah,
so it's
progression, I guess, is a better word.
Yeah, and so I mean, well, some of it is like, you're going to have, everybody. I always like to say, I'm trying to think of the best way to word this. Like everybody always wants to take credit when something awesome happens and then blame something else when something bad happens. But the reality is like when you're like, the thing is like, I'm pretty good at deadlifting, relatively speaking, but I've got long ass monkey arms. So that's mechanically to my advantage when I'm deadlifting. The same time as that long ass monkey arms and I kind of have a smaller rib cage don't help me to be an amazing presser. Mm-hmm. So structurally there is a realistic thing where it's like, whoever the best squatter in the world is, I guarantee does not have a super long femur, relative to his torso. And whoever the best bench presser in the world is, doesn't have super long monkey arms, relative to a small rib cage or something. So it's all relative because it's again, I think if you ever put it to the point where it's like, well, you have to be this strong at this movement or this strong at this movement, there's a degree of truth to that, but it's just you get a couple outlier freaks that are just kind of, a little bit balanced at everything, but generally, because of your structure, you're going to have things that you're just better at or not better at. But overall, I don't think there's any way around. You have to get really strong, relative to you. Again, you have to keep getting stronger, obviously, to get bigger. I mean, I don't think there's a whole, it's a, complicated subject that like, does progressive overload have to occur every single session? Depending on how you define it, maybe not. But over the course of 3 months, 6 months, 10 months, it's happening in some way, shape, or form if you're making progress. And if you don't, sometimes people don't think like, if you correct your form or you change the way you're doing something and make it more challenging, obviously that's a form of progressive overload as well too. So you could have benched the first time somebody benches 4 plates, they might be doing it like complete shit. 5 years later, they could be doing 4 plates with ridiculously strict, hard form, just making it harder. And obviously it progressed the body part that correlates, translating a lot. But so, yeah, I mean, strength's a relative thing. But I think that's the thing where there's there's a form component that obviously goes into progressive overload that people tend to neglect. And more so than just the obvious stuff of making sure you're training the trained muscle and not something else. And then more so even with, it's just directing the load where you want it to go, that type of thing. And then making it challenging throughout the range. So that's stuff where people, again, they tend to kind of lump form and progressive overload in separate categories. But people that obviously, they know what real progressive overload knows that they're pretty much, that you need both.
Yeah, for sure. No, I think that's what you kind of nailed that. And it was funny, but I had put a post up, this is now months ago, but we talked about it. And it was about overcomplicating bodybuilding. Yeah. And I had like 2 people directly like assume I was talking about you. Yeah. They're like, haha. And I'm like, no, you don't get it because that's not overcomplicating. That's how do I make this harder? Yeah. And there's a huge difference between mental masturbation and I'm trying to create this obscure fucking movement versus something as simple as, oh, you're a really, really strong hack squatter. Cool. Do a 6 count negative instead of a 4. Yeah. Yeah. It's harder. End of story.
And I think the biggest take home that I find is so, because I joke, I honestly, because this is where I came, I kind of came from hurting myself the first 5 years of training so much. in all honesty, the people that make more progress long term tend to be the people that have inherently hard work ethic. So there's this pattern of people that make it the farthest is they have this work ethic. It kind of gets them in a little bit of trouble somewhere. So then they have to start thinking, and they integrate that thought seamlessly in with their work ethic, where the other way around tends to not happen as much. You get the people that are these overthinkers, and they just constantly overthink themselves out of working hard. I think the big difference is like, it's what you do with information. I mean, I think that's the massive separator, where like you use information to, create limiting beliefs, to overthink stuff to actually get you like to not make good decisions in the gym, or are you capable of just taking information in of itself? Like, how could that possibly ever be bad? I mean, there's stuff, like I said, when I'll hear people talk and sometimes hear them talk about stuff that I honestly don't understand. And I'll just be like, fuck, like, I'll just like, let it sit there. And it might sit there for like months until either I kind of put the pieces together or I don't, or just kind of could sit there and that's that. But at the end of the day, like if you can take information and if you actually know how to like, if most of the time it's slowly integrated into what you're already doing and working hard, I mean, that's the difference, where someone will look like, oh, well, the fuck, this is overthinking. Like, fuck, I'll see shit or hear shit all the time. And it might take a while till I actually figure out like what actions can I actually do with this in the gym. And then some people will just take information and be like, just have it paralyze them or whatever, or mess up their decisions in the gym, or somehow make them not train harder. And that just seems to be the massive separating factor that exists out there.
Well, I think if you do it right, though, like for example, one thing I saw in your videos was the cuffs on the wrists, and on cables. And one day I was like, I wonder why that would be different. And I'm not somebody that actually wonders and looks it up. I just order the shit online, strap them on, and I'm like, yeah, that fucked me up. All right, cool.
It's hard. Yeah, fuck,
like, right. I don't, you know what I mean? It's like some people need the why.
Yeah.
I always say, I don't want labor pains. Just give me the baby. Like,
yeah.
Boom.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
I throw those straps on. I did some reps. I'm like, that's way fucking harder than holding the handle. Yeah. I don't know why, and I don't care why. Yeah. And that's how I'm doing them now.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So it's back to like you said though. It's just that was fucking hard, and I like to work hard, so let's do that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, and that's one of those things where at the end of the day, like I think the difference for people is that comes with part of my transparency thing, where it's like, if I have something that's like, where someone's like, oh, well, why would you talk to this guy? Or what would be the benefit of this? Or what would be the benefit of that? And it's like, there are some people like the fact that I'll have a solution. This might work good for 99 out of 100 people, but the people that come to me often are that one person that's like, okay, well, everybody told me to do this, but it doesn't work, or this hurts, or that's that, or whatever it is. And so 99 people will look at that and be like, oh, look at that fucking overcomplicated asshole. And I'm like, no, well, that's the fucking job of being a trainer, right? Like, if everybody that came to you, like everything just worked perfect and they all could do the same thing, then you wouldn't be a good trainer, right? I mean, that's your skill set. And so that's the thing where it's, and again, some of it's the nature of like, I do the same thing that everybody does sometimes. I make the mistake. It's my lack of emotional maturity where I'll see some of this negative stuff where I get exposed to it. It's unavoidable. And I'm like, oh God, Instagram sucks, blah, 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 blah. But the reality is, it's like, that's just anything you put on Instagram at any point in time. The reality is any post that I ever do is going to help somebody and it's going to hurt somebody. Even if the nature of the post is good, even if I'm saying work harder, put on a shit ton of weight, progress yourself, someone's going to go put on a bunch of weight and do it like a fucking dum-dum and hurt themselves. And if I say to some other post where it's like, all right, well, make sure you're making this challenging for the muscle, control this range of motion, someone's going to go chop their weight in half and go and start and squeezing shit really slow. I'm like, oh, I feel this way better. And literally do half of the work because they're being overly meticulous. So
that's not what I said either.
Yeah, exactly. So it's one of those things where, when you're speaking to so many people at the same time, it's impossible to nail it right with everybody, right? So you just try and do the best that you can. And generally the people that take stuff out of context sometimes is like, well, I get why this kind of looks different or this looks weird or whatever, but like for me, it's a solution where it's like, well, maybe you didn't actually see this problem because I've been in front of bodies, for the past decade and a half, like seeing different things. And then sometimes people don't see the long-term stuff that I get to see, where it's like I'll have some 20-year-old kid be like, oh, that's fucking stupid. I'm like, all right, well, we'll talk in 2 decades, when you're going to face this problem that I'm dealing with that I see on a regular basis. Right. And so that's some of that's the nature of it is what it is, where it's like, it's my fault if I ever like see some of the negativity, or there's always going to be people that don't get it or whatever. Some people are obviously just grumpy for the sake of being grumpy, and I'm just something else for them to be grumpy about, in which case, at least I'm giving them something to do.
You're still serving a purpose there, John.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what it's all about. But I think you nailed it too, is it's about making sure people are paying attention also to what works for them.
Oh yeah.
I love dead skulls, and I can train them heavy as fuck, and I have invincible elbows.
Yeah.
So I can do whatever I want. And I literally had a guy the other day. He goes, I added the dead skulls into my routine. I've never had elbow problems. Now I do. Should I stop?
Yeah.
Yes.
Like you need to ask me that question. Yeah. Like, don't do that.
Really? Like this hurts. Well, don't do it again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ever.
Yep.
I was gonna ask you. You've trained a lot of great bodybuilders. Have people have come to collaborate with you and see what you have to offer, and from Dallas McCarver, obviously, onwards. Who are some of the standouts as far as like, holy shit, this person can just work like fucking crazy?
Yeah. Fuck, man. I always hate answering this because honestly, I mean, everybody I work with is impressive in their own capacity. But yeah, some of the outliers. I mean, honestly, like Ben will tell you too. Like Ben at his peak, like fucking some of it's not necessary. Like some people, like the amount of actual working volume that he could do sometimes, I don't think I've ever seen anybody do that. I mean, so there were times when we do workouts where he would do like, on stuff that would be like from hack squats to leg press to whatever, where between those and big movements, you do like 12, 13, 14 like working sets. And it's like things like every set to the point where it's like 2 failure, pass failure, we're about to shit your pants. And then like he'd like just walk for like 60 seconds and be good to go and right back in. And like this is like heavy shit. He's doing like, 7 plates on the hack squat, then right over to fucking 1 billion plates on the leg press and doing 20 reps there. So Ben, when he was kind of at his peak of competing, fuck, his work capacity just didn't make sense, to be honest. And that's where I kind of had some of the fun. We have people train with us. I won't name names, but very often we have people come and train. And I'm like, I've never seen like grown ass men like quit. Like that was my whole thing. Like when I first started training with him, like, I might be at the end of the workout, literally using like my wife's weight if I have to, just so I can keep moving. But like, I won't stop. Like it'll literally, like, right. I'm not going to embarrass myself training with anybody. Like now some of that's to the point of stupidity where really now I'd probably actually almost injure myself. And I'm like, well, fuck, I don't want to be able to not work out for the next 10 years because of like, I don't know, having a dick measuring contest. But at that point in time, it was like the amount of work he could do with the amount of load is still some of the most impressive I've seen. Honestly, Dana Lynn Bailey is a freak.
I was hoping you were. I was wondering because I'm a good friends with Dana and I knew about you training her and we had her on the show, eh? So she mentioned you. She said that you tried to kill her and it didn't quite work.
Yeah, no. Well, I mean, it was honestly fun as hell because he's one of those people where it's like I've been around freakishly strong people and I've been around people that obviously have very good form. It's the combination of the two that I find very impressive, right? Where it's like what, and I joke like that's people that are actually strong. It's like there's people that are fake strong where I'm like, okay, technically you're moving that weight, but you're not actually moving it with your muscles or you're kind of making a total body exercise. So Dana was one of those people a couple times when we worked together and we still continue to, like, especially the first times would be like, obviously she already knew how to train, obviously trained very hard, and obviously her form was pretty damn good. So it'd be like these little adjustments. And, and she would obviously feel the difference instantly where it'd be like fucking horrible. But she'd be one of those people, like, I would literally I'd fucking murder her. Like, I'd take her on a set that's like 2 pass failure. And I'd do it because she wouldn't break form, so she'd take this extremely far. And then like she'd be laying on the floor fucking dead. She'd fall on the floor, lay on the floor. It's a joke. The first time we trained, I got like 6 different pictures of her just like fucking laying on the floor. But then she'd get up 60 seconds later and be like, can we do another one? I'm like, I've literally never had anyone ask for another set, like after a set like that. And I'm like, all right, fuck, if you want to, like, let's go. And so yeah, her ability to like, I mean, she got fucking murdered. And she'd tell you that. But she also was like murdered to the point where she could still go again like 90 seconds later, where again most people cannot. And then honestly, like Dallas was extremely impressive. I mean, honestly, he was like real, like actual strong. Honestly, Luke is impressive as hell. Like Luke's one of those people. He's one of the. I mean, I still every once in a while I see things that still kind of like make me scratch my head a little bit because like, I've seen people like incline press 405 or hack squat 1 billion fucking plates. But like normally when they do it, like it looks like that weight. Like I think I have the same thing the first time I saw some weight Luke was doing. I was like, are those fake plates?
I saw him do an incline today, and I was like it was so smooth with 405. It looked like he was like 135.
What the fuck? Well, the joke too is I don't know if he was training at that gym where they have those plates that actually look like the fake plates.
Yeah, the big ones.
Yeah, the big ones. And so like the funny thing is like I know he's not actually looking, and I mean this as a compliment, but the way he would move heavy weight, it looked like it was fake weight. And I was like, right. Where it's like, even if I had seen someone do the equivalent weight with a similar rep range, it's like stuff just looks easy when he's going. And because like I said, even for me, like if I've had some, what I consider some of my top sets or best sets in various things, like, if I watch back a video, I'm like, it looked fucking horrible. You're like, oh yeah, that was all a fucking 600 pounds. He almost died. Even if my form was okay, it's still like, it looked like I was holding fucking 600
It looked like
pounds.
every rep was hard.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So those are some of the standout. But I mean, everyone I train with trains hard. My training partner, Bryce, trains hard. I'm training Terrence now, he trains hard. Obviously, whenever Hunter and I get together, Hunter trains really hard. And you just get some of those outliers where, again, it's like, Ben will even say he didn't need to train the way that he had to train. Like, most people don't need that much working volume, but like he's just kind of built for it, and like had something wrong with his brain too, where he liked doing that at the time as well. So yeah, those are some of the standouts I would say. I'm sure there's more, but yeah, those are the first ones I guess popped in my head.
How low a training volume? Like I mean, I see what you do. Like, my general impression of your workouts is you like to start with something that loads. Like, really like the safety bar squats with the heels elevated or whatever, or those heavy banded hack squats. You use like a core couple basics at the beginning, and then you'll get into what you call your pump metabolic work. Yeah. So how much like failure working volume, because those are the type of sets I do, the ones you're doing, 2 forced reps, how many of those do you think is too few? Where do you kind of like start to think, man, this is a lot for one workout? I mean, obviously you got guys like Ben that are doing 12, 14 of those sets
for sure.
But do you also have other guys doing 2?
I mean, so always it's definitely one of those things that's individual dependent, and I like to adhere to, like, I like low volume work so much too. I mean, because one, it adheres to the idea of obviously one as little stimulus as possible to produce as much result as possible. And I think that's just a great principle everyone should adhere to. I mean, I think about it long term too, because like, I mean, same as everybody else, things I was already aware of with people I work with is like, man, if you can do stuff with half the volume, like, why not? Because volume's the fucking killer. People think load is what injures people, and it's not. I mean, with rare exception, obviously you get under load and a freak thing happen, but it's overuse stuff. It's volume that's the most taxing on recovery and taxing on joints. So I really liked it with everybody. I'm like, I don't really have a blanket as far as where do we start with volume. I just kind of like, well, if I was going to say I start with something, most commonly I start with 2 sets. There's a top set and a back off set, and just kind of see what happens. And then again, the kind of individual dependent, recovery dependent. Occasionally for legs, I would say as a body part, you need to push the volume up a little bit. Still individual dependent. I mean, I'll have some people that can just do 1 or 2 working sets at everything, and that's fine. And volume is one of the few things I think is necessary for some people that just have maybe good leg genetics but want world-class legs. Then that's a place where you have to add in a little bit of the kind of horrible stuff, where I think there really is a place for the fucking drop sets and the strip sets, the ones, again, like the shit your pants sets on like a leg press and stuff. And I think that's one of the body parts you kind of need it. But yeah, it's always individual dependent. If I had a place that I'd say that I like to start, it's probably 2 working sets, and then I just kind of play it by ear from there.
Per exercise.
Yeah, per exercise. Yep.
Yeah. And then, so what percentage of the workout do you kind of devote to the pump metabolic stuff?
Maybe like 10%.
Okay,
so it's like
that's important.
Yeah. So there's still like there's idea I want is like the whole thing, honestly. And again, it's not worth nerding out on too much. Is like I don't even honestly know if like metabolic pathways for hypertrophy exist. It could just be another way that you can actually have a certain percentage of muscle fibers producing a lot of force. Where again, it could be the thing where it's like that's another way that you can get this high threshold output is through fatigue. So I think a lot of pump work is actually just another way of creating this amount of fatigue that makes you use, kind of like your high threshold motor units, which again, will just have a smaller percentage, I think, of the muscles that can grow the most, your fast twitch stuff, working. None of that's necessary. I mean, honestly, the main reason that I keep pump work in is I think it has some benefit, if nothing else, for recovery. I mean, I think there's benefit of having a lot of blood flow in the muscle you trained at the end of your workout. And then honestly, some of it is because I like it. So I tell people where I've had it enough where it's like, I've never seen, because I've had pretty many people that they do all straight sets and they just do their big meat, potatoes, output stuff, and that's it. I have some people that have integrated more volume stuff. Some people that kind of have a blend of both. And I've never, ever seen anything that I think it would actually limit someone's, progress. And I've seen some people where I think it actually helps them progress a little bit for certain body parts. But I'm also happy to tell people that, like, I do like thinking of like, okay, well, here's a different way. I think there's some benefit to training muscles through their full contractile range, which isn't necessary. I think with your big output movements, it's not possible with some of your stuff anyway. So some of that I like to use is, okay, well, here's a way to train this range and that range with something that looks like pump work or whatever, if nothing, just for joint health or whatever you want to call it. So some of it's I just like to have that in there. But normally if I do it, the way that I like to do it is 1 or 2 rounds. I like it with a superset or a giant set or something where it's like I'll have a purpose. Normally starts with that, like a range I didn't train, a little bit of whenever I've just got something left. And honestly, it's just a different type of horrible, like doing like doing a max set of 8 to 10 on something. It's horrible, in its own right, depending on what it is. But doing something that takes you like 30 reps deep on something is like a different type of pain and horrible. Yeah. And I honestly like that, so some of it I will literally tell people where it's like, cause I get a lot of people, the same thing, they overanalyze. It's like, well, what does this do? Do you need this? Is it too much? Like, how much is it? And most normal, like, especially intermediate and beginners, I'm like, don't even bother with it. Like, just get, if you want to have for each body part, 3 or 4 really good core movements, just start with that, get really good at those as well too. But it's the same people. I get some people that are like, oh, why do you do this different stuff or whatever? And like, those same people, like everyone's had it when you're in the gym and you have somebody come up like, hey, try this thing you've never tried before. And you do this different weird thing or you do some fucking pumpy thing. You're like, oh, that was fucking horrible. That was great. Like you just like that kind of feel or that effect from it. Right. So it's like the same people that will trash me doing something like that sometimes. I'm like, why would you not want that feeling of something horribly painful? And I could make on paper argument that it is beneficial in some capacity. But then I even tell people then again, is how much is this actually leading to muscle growth? I'm kind of like, well, meh. I could make an argument that it might a little bit.
That's why it's 10%.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's what people literally get. Like people will be like, I'll do this workout that's like an hour and a half and like 80 minutes of the workout are just straight sets and hard shit. And then I'll have 10 minutes of this little thing that I finish with. And then some of it is literally like, obviously not to be a dick, but I'm like going to put stuff online. It's like, do you want to see me do like my wildly mediocre like weight on this exercise like every single fucking week? Like, oh, good, like you did this weight again for this, whatever. It's like, and I'm not the guy that's making any exciting progress. It's like I'm like I literally have the fucking micro plates that I'm putting on. Like I did 2.5 pounds more total this time. I'm the only guy doing 222.5 pounds on an exercise. I was like, that's right. That's not exactly.
I put 2 collars on both sides instead of 1.
Yeah, exactly.
You need those little 100-gram plates. I've seen those little 100-gram plates.
I have the plates. I think it's Plate Mates that make them. I have the ones that are. I literally have a 1/4 pound, a 1/2 pound, 3/4 pound.
Oh, okay,
like,
there you go. Yeah, 1/4 pound
plates.
plates. I saw those at a gym once. They were like, we're very serious about our progressive overload.
I'm like, if you ever catch me with them on the leg press, though, you can just punch me in the face. It's like, those do not go on the leg press.
I was going to say, do you have a 45? Is there anything you have a 45 only rule on? Is it the leg press?
I think, I don't think I've ever put quarters on the leg press, but I wouldn't be opposed to that if I was really doing it. I think I would let a quarter slide, but. Yeah,
but not a 1/4 pound.
Yeah, exactly, not a 1/4 pound. Well, at this rate of progress, like 30 years from now, I'm gonna have some fucking big legs.
Yeah. Maybe that's what I got to try. I got to get real serious about those micro increments.
Yeah.
So awesome. Yeah, you got another one, Dusty?
I think it's pretty stocked. I mean, what I hope that people are taking away, and one of the reasons I was excited about this was. The stuff that gets put out and gets seen a bunch is the different, Joe?
Yeah.
And I feel like that's the part that somehow that 10% is what a lot of the hardcore guys, the only thing they look at. And I'm like, how are you not seeing the 90%? And I don't really consume a lot of content. I don't have a lot of time. But I do have a few pages that I check on and see stuff. And it's just blows my mind how many people immediately dismiss because they see anything different.
Yeah.
It's like, like I do the John Meadows dumbbell swings for rear delts, a real small movement.
Yeah, for sure.
And they fuck me up and they have for forever and I love them. And it never fails if someone has to jump in and go, well, no wonder you've got an incomplete physique. And I'm like,
You're going to have somebody take something out of context. Yeah.
Like, you should try a real deadlift. I'm like, well, that was last week, and it's also filmed, so go take a peek.
Yeah, and that's the funny thing too, where I'm like, God, the funny thing is, and I get it. This is again, it's Instagram, it's social media, but it's like in person, like people fucking love that shit. Like half of it is like, I mean, I'm the same as everybody else. Like, I mean, honestly, I need my workouts now for fucking mental reasons, and like, I love training. It's always been my thing. Like, it's my outlet. I don't have any other vices. And so, adherence to my workouts is not hard, but at the same time, it's like, man, you've been doing this long enough. Like, when I work with like just especially like hardcore meatheads, it's like we might do a workout that's 3 boring exercises for chest, but like, hey, let's try this thing to finish. And like, honestly, most of the time, like the most hardcore meatheads, like they fucking love it. Like, why wouldn't you love it? If it's something that's a little bit of a different range, a little bit of different control, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And again, everybody knows the feeling of like, I mean, I don't think anybody's out there saying that the pump in and of itself is the thing that's going to grow muscle. But who the fuck doesn't like getting just like a horrible, painful pump and going through something slightly different in the gym? Again, if it's not going to hurt you and it has a thought process. And so it's like funny. It's like, not to be a dick, but the people that like trash that stuff, I was like, man, if I took you through that on your workout,
I'd
like
kill you.
Yeah, and you wouldn't be trashing. You'd be like, "Oh my god, this is great!" You know, you'd be excited about it.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that people kind of get is like, because I'll have that conversation with people, which is funny. Like, "Oh, why'd you do this or that?" And I was like, "Well, like, here's the reason, and here's the reason." Like, I honestly never do anything that's like, "Oh, this is fucking different." It'll always have like, it's for this range, it's for this thing. There's a thought process for it. It's like if I have a thought process, like, why the fuck wouldn't I want to do it? And I give shit. I joke every single time. Like, it's very nice. Like when I train with Flex anytime. He loves that stuff. And like, he'll joke with me that like, oh, I always like Joe because like, you know, he always does different stuff and different. I'm kind of like, oh, Flex, like, that's not my deal. My deal isn't doing like, and he'll be like, because every time he kind of says that I have to feel the need as a purist to kind of correct him. And I'm like, well, there's this bigger picture. He's basically like, just shut the fuck up. And like, let me say that, like, I like the shit that you do. And that's half of it. Like, literally, it's like, you know, I mean, obviously Flex has been training for a billion years. He knows how to create a world-class physique. He knows what works for him, but he's the same as everybody else. Like, he fucking loves it. Like, anytime I come over and train, he's like, all right, I want to do this, and then you do the rest. Or I want to do this part, then you finish that. Just do something stupid to murder us over here. Right. And so it's like, you know, I mean, for someone that's the same as everybody else, like, why wouldn't you want some of that, you know, in your session if you want? And I'm the same person where, like, dude, if I'm ever limited on time or if my recovery is ever really low, like, I'll just have workouts that don't have any of that. Like, I'll just have a workout that's 3 fucking boring movements, and I'll go in and I'll just try and hang on to whatever muscle I've got. And I'm just like, who the fuck would want me to post that? Like, is that really that interesting for you guys?
Right.
But
I think that's what people miss when you're at that level, though. I know Ron and I do that all the time. You know, I do my own thing. So we'll be overseas or something somewhere, and I'm like, we're doing your workout, whatever that means.
Yeah.
And it's going to kick the shit out of me because it's totally different, and it's going to be fun. So let's rock. You know, let's just you know, beat our asses. Okay, go.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so. I think that's a good place to wrap up, is that thought that you just got across there, where, you know, how Flex was like, let's do this one movement I like, and then I just want you to kill us.
Yeah.
It's still, at the end of the day, comes down to just training really fucking hard.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And, you know, it seems like that's always where we wind up, isn't it, Dusty?
Yeah. Back to the most simple thing, no matter how complex it is to get there.
Like, you know, every guest we've had on, from Ian to Luke to DLB to Aceto to you, it to Jose, it's just like every single guy, JP, everyone we've had on, the common thread is like, at the end of the day, if you don't have if you're not putting your balls on the table, it's just not going to happen. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I'm glad that I'm having my entire career that's now behind me kind of confirmed repeatedly. There's the odd night where I go to bed like, how much better could I have been if I would have trained lighter with more volume? How much better could I have been if I would have listened to someone else and I had a different role model and a different mentor? And then you're like, man, it's just, you know, it's just that's how it was done. So. Yeah, man. I mean, let everyone know where they can find you. Everyone that's not totally familiar with you, you're mainly Instagram, and you got a YouTube channel too, right? Yeah, I'm kind of starting to revitalize that a little bit. Yeah, but Instagram is where 99% of my stuff goes. So it's just Hypertrophy Coach, pretty easy. Hypertrophy Coach for those that can't spell. Yeah, that's tough. Myself, a bit of a barrier. For exactly. You already. It's too big of a word. And then I have some stuff. Same thing. YouTube page is the same thing, and you know, and there's plenty of stuff. It's easy to find any more content from me. Through those places if you want after that. But so that gym that you train in, that's your own little private studio, right? It's one of my clients' gym. So I have a client that built that gym basically for him to train at and for me to train him at, you know, and basically his buddies to train at. So awesome. Okay. Yeah, it's kind of the dream setup. So I've got my own gym without having to pay for it, which is pretty epic. I got to pick all the equipment, so that was nice. I was gonna say, you must have had, you know, you got I see the squat press in there right next to the hack. And you've got the Watson dumbbells, and you've got a big ass squat rack in there, and lots of bars. You should do a video tour of it because I'm just a gym nut, right?
Yeah.
Like, I want to see the floor plan, and I want to see where you got the hammer strength stuff, and I want to see all that.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I will do that.
Hey, thanks, Joe. Thanks for coming on, man.
Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate you guys having me. So
we're gonna have to meet in person actually one of these days because I was telling Dusty I've seen you multiple times, like 20 feet away from me. Like I've seen you twice in a hotel lobby while I was checking in.
Oh yeah.
One time in Vegas when I was paying for my food, and every time I was like, I'm gonna go over and I'm gonna introduce myself to Joe, and then I turn around and you're gone.
I'm gone. Yeah.
You're like the mystery man. I can't.
Yeah, I'm very mysterious. Yeah.
So okay, thanks a lot, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Cheers.
Yeah.
And we're out. Scott, we good?
You're still there.
Yep.
You got to hit the hang up button. See, it goes
I got you. Yep.
The tech knowledge there.
There we go. I got you. Thanks, guys.
See ya.
So we have guests that don't want to leave, Dusty.
Well, that's when you know you've made it. I thought that was awesome, man. I really liked it, and I don't know how many of our guests understand or understood, I should say, the depth of his knowledge. And he still just brushed it. One thing I love about him is he kind of reminds me, completely opposite and somewhat the same. Aceto is one that comes off as not really knowing anything. And I've actually I've witnessed someone decide to call him out on the scientific side of things and just get annihilated because Chris just doesn't talk that way. He doesn't need to. Joe, although people know he does, I really do love his delivery because for someone like me, all kidding aside, I'm not interested in that level. So when you can get to the fucking point and then I can see a benefit, I'm interested, So he's actually one of the pages. Like I said, I don't consume a lot of content, but I check his page at least twice a week and we'll scan 4 or 5 posts, watch them, read them, knock them out. And like I said, I've even implemented a couple along the way of things that I was like, God damn, I would not have done that on my own, which is sick.
Yeah. No, that's I've been following him for a while. Being a little banged up, sometimes he'll put something up that's related to so if you have no cartilage left in your shoulders or something, and I'm like, oh.
And he tagged you in it, which is weird.
I should pay attention to what he's saying, So there's a lot of stuff like that I appreciate, but yeah, the how it kind of came all around to training real hard, when he puts up a fancy combo of an exercise, I think people who look into the why is that exercise paired with that exercise, the main reason is because it sucks.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's what you got to get back to. And I've done the same. I've hired many, many people in my career to write me programs. I had John Jewett just write me one that I'm doing right now. And it was funny. I reached out to him and I was like, hey, I want you to write me a program. And he was like, all right, well, what do you want in there? I'm like, knock the shit out of me. And a mutual respect thing. So he's like, well, what are you thinking? I'm like, no, literally pretend I don't know anything. Write me a program and I want to do it. And it's awesome because some of the stuff I'm very much like, fuck yeah. And then some of them I'm like, all right, I'm tossing that and putting this in that spot.
Right.
It works out well that way because at the end of the day, what I do find and things I get to turn around and share with clients are little gems. I'm like, ooh, I wouldn't have had that one. I would never, combine adductors with a single leg Cybex leg press, but turns out it whips your ass.
Yeah. Well, because the workout that's going to kick your ass is the one you're not doing. So you've had a big week.
I have had a big week.
You got a new roommate.
I do. I've got, and he's actually been keeping an eye on this, making sure that everything's on the up and up. See, because when you've got an animal this big, they sit here the entire time. And no one knows. So
I can't believe we made it to the 100-minute mark before you put him on. So introduce him.
Yes, I don't want to say his name. This is Harvey. I named him after Harvey Specter from Suits.
Nice.
I feel like he's a closer for sure.
He's definitely a closer.
He's been trying to close with the ladies everywhere I go so far, which
right. And settling is winning.
But no, it's been awesome, and it was a big move, man. I was really contemplating. I mean, number one, when Zoe died, I knew that I'm a person that wants a dog, but it was the whole like, when is the right time and replacing and yada, yada, yada. And I also have allergies. So I can't have any type of dog. It has to be hypoallergenic. These dogs have hair. They don't have fur. So right. I was actually looking at breeders. Okay. You know, because I was like, fuck it. You know, I know rescuing is awesome, but whatever.
Well, the number one thing with breeders is for people who, like you said, like you can't always find a hyperallergenic dog. So that's, you know,
I kept looking. I kept looking, and I was looking at the Yorkie rescues also. But the other problem is I'm a pussy, and a lot of those Yorkies were coming with shortened lifespan expectancies, and I was like, I can't do like a 3-year knockout punch again. So I was actually dealing with a couple breeders, found a couple I was looking at, and next thing you know, I find I don't even really know what you would call it, but I think it was like a puppy mill situation, where all of a sudden these supposed, and he definitely appears to be very much so a full Yorkie, were available at a fraction of the price and needed a place to go. And, you know, I basically paid some vet bills more or less and picked this dude up, and it's been awesome. So it's a kind of a win-win. I'm like, all right, good.
Right. Was it kind of what I have a friend up here in Canada who's like, they'll like go take the dogs from puppy mills.
Yeah,
like
no, that's how they do that.
Yeah, they like,
and then you're picking it up from a person still.
Yeah,
They've got the shots, they got all this stuff. They have they have the parents, so they have the idea of where they're coming from. But at the end of the day, I was like, perfect, you know. And it was just comical because the timing, like, I got that information for this on Thursday night, and I picked them up Friday. Because obviously it's a pretty, like you said, when I said it to you, were like, you don't get dogs like this in that scenario very often, you know?
Here, I'm just gonna, I think we'll do this. It might be fun if Jedi gets to meet Harvey.
That's right. See, well, and Jedi's been on his best behavior lately, you know?
He's been pretty good. See? There we go. Jedi and Harvey. Put that face in there, buddy.
Those are men's dogs right there.
Those are men's dogs. Hey?
I actually love it. Everywhere I go, people just, because I teach them to follow just by walking.
Right.
And so everywhere you go, people do that connection of you and that dog.
Yeah. That's pretty cool. Well, I got a 15-pounder. Well, you got like a 3-pounder, don't you?
Yeah, he's all not quite 3 yet. You know, and you never know how big they're going to be. So, like, Zoe was 14, so almost exactly Jed's size. So I'm hopeful that he'll be on the bigger end too, just because it's easy. You know, when they can jump, do their own thing. So, because right now it's actually like, okay, make sure I don't step on him.
Yeah, no, definitely. Like, there's
tiny.
a size. Yeah, there's a tiny. Yeah.
You know, I put a picture up the first day because I wanted people to understand, so I put him next to a mutant pro bottle to just kind of like, that. Do you understand sleeping? What I don't actually keep the pro bottle in the middle of my living room, just so you know.
Yeah. No, man, well, I'm happy for you. I know it's a new chapter.
Absolutely.
You know, new chapter in the life.
And now we've got somebody keeping an eye on us on both ends to make sure we're doing the show right, you know?
Right. So you had a good weekend, though?
Yeah, solid weekend. And man, we're so booked now with guests. Like, I've caught myself almost saying the guests.
Yeah, I know.
On the regular. And I'm like, because I'm obviously really stoked for next week as well. Which I feel really safe that everything will come through and it'll be good because he's my neighbor, so I'll have to just go knock on the door. But,
you know, I know that next week's probably going to be a lot of fun.
Oh, for sure. I like how we're bouncing around too. We go from Aceto on one end, then super technical, and now we're going to go to a place we've never been before.
Yeah, this might be we might not even be able to release this next episode. We might just decide to can it.
This one gets kept with all the outtakes of shit Dusty has said at Mutant over the years.
Yeah. So it'll be good, but I'm sure everyone will enjoy it. They probably won't know the guy. Like our followers, most of our followers probably won't know the guy, but they'll know him when we're done.
Oh, for sure. Yeah,
I have got lots of followers.
It's going to jump through the roof with some new followers for him, for sure.
Yeah. So that'll be good. I emceed a show on the weekend. I don't know if you saw the pictures of me with my fancy suit on.
You got a few suits now. You've upped your suit game.
I've upped my suit game. I got 6 suits now.
Man.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
you're like the regular. I mean, you've got to be one of the most regular MCs up there now. I mean, you're always booked.
Yeah, I get a lot of requests. I have to. I can only do so many a year, though. I get really nervous right before each one. You know.
Really?
I still do. Like, I'm totally fine. So someone will say, "Hey, do you want to MC and show?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'd love to MC your show." And I just say yes. And then like 3 months go by, 4 months go by, and then about 3 hours before, I'm like, "Holy fuck!"
Those damn last names, Galley-Beats.
Well, yeah, like you're like, "Oh, I hope this goes well." And like, there's so many moving parts to a show, and sometimes you show up in the show as just this refined machine.
Right.
And then other times you show up and the show is like kind of chaotic and like you're just start emceeing and you hope there's athletes there to come out when you say their names.
Right.
Like, and it's very, very difficult. Like promoting a show, running a show is super fucking tech. Like there's a lot of stuff going on. If you got a couple volunteers that don't show up, now there's like, it's a lot and they work really hard back there. Yeah. So, you know, whether it's chaotic backstage or not, the volunteers are working hard. Okay. And so you just got to keep the show moving as smooth as possible. But we had Big Rami guest pose at the Popeyes Fall Classic. And
how was that?
Did you see any of the stuff on my Instagram?
Well, yeah, I saw, but I mean, here's the thing: I don't think anyone understands is I don't care if they're standing next to someone. I don't care. Video, picture, anything that's not in person is not the same.
No. So Rami was at my gym all week. He was training at West Coast.
Yeah, I saw him sign the wall. Pretty sick.
Came in, yeah, did legs, signed the wall, did back, did chest. He was in there a bunch of times training, had a blast. He is the biggest bodybuilder I have ever seen in my life. He said he was 350 pounds, and he made me look like a little kid. Like I just felt like a skinny normal guy standing next to him.
Right.
And
man, I look tall.
Yeah, you know, I'm like 272 or whatever, and like just felt like nothing. He got the biggest legs I've ever seen ever in my life.
Right.
And the most shocking thing, I have a video. You know, my natural instinct was to video when he was guest posing, right? But I was standing directly along the side, like I'm MC.
The worst possible spot to be filming.
Worst possible spot. So I filmed for like 15 seconds, and I thought, well, it's a waste of time. I put my camera away. But then when I watched it after, I was like, oh, I caught him from the side doing a back double bicep.
And he still has a tight waist.
I was waiting for the special,
protrusion,
right?
Yep.
And I was like, holy shit. I started showing the video to people at the gym. I was like, look, he doesn't even have, like, there's nothing. There's nothing. Like, he's arching his back, and his stomach comes out as much as his back arches.
Right. Like, it's actually not his stomach at all. It's his spine pushing everything forward.
It's like nothing. And then he turns around and does, like, you know, the most muscular, and his abs are just flat and bricked out. And everyone was like, he wasn't even bloated. Everyone is saying that. They're like, he didn't even have a gut.
Yeah, he's 350 pounds.
Fucking huge. Unbelievable. He had manager Matt was with him.
Yeah.
So we had manager Matt up from Wisconsin. And it was good. You know, he'd be a good guest.
Yeah.
Because he's traveled the world with everybody.
Yeah, he knows everyone. Everyone knows him.
You know, he goes.
I would love to get him on too, just because it would be very curious to see how does the birth of manager Matt take place.
Well,
like, how did you get where you are? I mean,
yeah, like he says,
that's a story that everybody knows.
He goes, my next trip's 2 weeks in Middle East with Jay. Yeah. You know, and like the end of November, we go to the Middle East for 2 weeks. So, you know, he's on the road with Jay for 2 weeks at a time, and then you see him. He's flying to Europe with Rami, and he's flying to Canada with Rami, and he's just, you know, he's got all those guys he's repping. So he'd be funny, man. And
for sure.
You know, he's got to make sure he's a manager, so he's making sure they got their food and making sure they got a gym and all that stuff. Yeah. So I imagine there's a lot of funny stuff he runs into along the way. But I tell you, Rami's a great guy and one of the most polite guests we've ever had at West Coast.
Right.
He is like, and also, you know how Chris mentioned that Eduardo Correa was really aware?
Mm-hmm.
Like, remember when he mentioned that? He said, he said he's never known anyone who was more aware of his surroundings.
Right.
Rami's very, very aware as well. He, I noticed this one time. I know it sounds funny, but I happened to be looking right at him, and he was walking along, and he went to turn a corner, and he had his hood up.
Right.
So he couldn't.
No peripheral. Yeah.
No peripheral. And this little bikini girl at the gym was kind of coming along, and I just happened to think, oh shit, he's gonna run right into her.
Right.
And at the last second, he paused, and she came like past him and through, and then he kept walking, and I was like, oh fuck, he's really like, he was aware, he knew she was coming somehow.
Right.
And I know that sounds like funny, like it's what's he talking about? But a guy that size, I guess, would have to.
That's how I feel walking around with Harvey here. You know, that's how he feels walking around with me.
Yeah. So she was a little dog, and he was aware enough to not step on her. Right.
Exactly the time, but a very cute dog, very cute.
Yeah. And then I saw him a couple times. He like went way out of his way to open the front door and hold it open for some women that were coming and going.
Right.
Just stuff like that. Rami's just a thoughtful guy.
Yeah.
And he took pictures with everyone at the gym, and he was really cool. And our members are awesome. They like let him train,
Yeah. Let him do what you need to do, and then
let him train, and then bug him after. So it's he really enjoyed the place. Nice. But yeah, man, biggest thing I've ever seen. You get a chance, anyone ever get a chance to watch Big Ramy guest pose right now? Unbelievable. So he said he's doing the Arnold.
He is doing the Arnold. Nice.
Yeah. So I mean, it looks like he literally has to drop like 30 pounds, which
puts him at 320.
Well, yeah. So he's not 5'7" dropping 30 pounds, right? He's 350 pounds dropping 30 pounds. So what? 15 of that's just like
fluid
water.
Yeah.
So he's what? He looked like he'd get ready for the Olympia in 8 weeks.
That's fucking wacky.
Yeah.
You know what though? I'd seen him leading into the Olympia. I know he was hoping for an invite or whatever. I mean, you could tell he was. But I've never. You know what's funny? I've never seen him not look good. He's so big now. It's not like he's a guy who's putting on asinine amounts of just whatever he can to get big.
No.
It's like, well, I've been big since birth. So what are you gonna do?
I'm good friends with. It was actually Matt that used to work at Mutant.
Yep.
Who made him his meals.
Okay, good.
Because he's got that meal company now, right? Yep. And so Matt made all his meals for him, and they're not big meals. Like I saw them, they're
normal,
like whatever, 8-10 ounces of fish, chicken or whatever, and a cup of rice. Yeah. Like they're just, but he eats like 7 of them a day,
right?
So it adds up. But he's eating a lot of clean, small meals, and he looks fucking nuts.
Yeah, that's wacky.
So yeah, man.
Another slap in the face of genetics.
Yeah. So Dusty, I got a back workout. I'm super motivated today. I'm gonna do some of Joe's stuff.
Nice. Well, I love it. Go check out his page, blast a few out, and maybe for once you have an entire gym and members that all know you. Maybe get us some videos.
Yeah. Okay, I'll promise.
Kill me with the videos. I tell this guy for content all the time, and he gets a good roll going of like a day and a half. And then I don't see anything for. I see all this other shit. I'm like, people actually want to see you train.
I just feel like I don't lift heavy enough for anyone on the gram to give a fuck anymore. With training partners are all.
You know what it is? It's the grind. I think that's what I've really realized is people want to see work.
Yeah.
Because I know I do it. I get tagged and stuff by people. It'll be a 315-pound deadlift from a fan, but when he grinds out that extra rep or two, I'm like, that was fucking nasty. Like it doesn't even equate. That's what people don't understand. The weight means jack shit.
So I can still make 315.
I don't think you could do it. I think you could do 225, but he was much stronger than you.
I can make 225 look good, Dusty.
Love it. All right. Well, until next week, huh?
Yeah, you bet, man. I'll see you again in about 6.9 days.
No doubt.
Okay. Thanks, man. Thanks, everybody, for watching. Remember to check us out on Advices Radio Network if you want the audio downloads, or right here on Think Big Bodybuilding Media for the YouTube channel. And tell your friends and post the links and get the word out, because that's how these shows get the viewers. So really appreciate all of you. Next week, I had to throw the hat on because we couldn't do 2
I went bald
fresh shaves, right? So when I saw you had a fresh shave, I thought, fuck, I need the hat. So we'll flip it next week.
There you go.
Okay. Thanks, guys. Remember, everybody, it's just bodybuilding.